In the quiet town of Stephenville, Texas, a chilling crime took place that remains unsolved to this day. Nestled in the heart of the Lone Star State, Stephenville was once a peaceful retreat, until the tranquility was shattered by a crime so brutal it left the town in shock. A crime that remains a dark mystery even after 3.5 decades. In the summer of 1987, Susan Woods, a woman of quiet demeanor and unassuming presence, was found in her home. Her lifeless body was discovered in the most private of sanctuaries, her own bathtub. The scene painted a horrifying picture. Susan had been violated in the worst possible way before her life was taken from her. Her hands, tied behind her back, told a tale of a struggle that ended in a heartbreaking tragedy. The authorities were left with a chilling crime scene, 2 sets of unidentified fingerprints, and a town gripped by fear. The investigation, led by a determined lieutenant, yielded little progress, leaving more questions than answers. This is the story of Susan Woods, a quiet, shy woman whose life ended abruptly and whose murderer remains at large. This is the story of an unsolved mystery in Stephenville, a tale that continues to haunt the town and its people, a shadow that lingers, reminding us of the darkness that can dwell among us. In 1987, a gruesome discovery shocked the residents of Stephenville. A quiet and shy woman, Susan Woods, who lived a life of solitude in this small Texas town, became the center of a chilling mystery. The tranquility of the town was shattered when her lifeless body was discovered in a place considered safe, a place considered home. Imagine, if you will, the horrifying scene. Susan was found lifeless in her bathtub, a chilling sight that would haunt those who discovered her. Her hands were bound behind her, a chilling testament to the terror she must have felt in her final moments. The details are distressing but necessary to understand the true horror of this crime. She had been violated, a brutal act of dominance and control. As if this wasn't enough, she was strangled, her life snuffed out in the most personal, intimate way a killer can choose. The scene spoke volumes about the brutality of the perpetrator. There was no sign of forced entry suggesting that Susan might have known her killer, that she might have opened her door and welcomed her doom, oblivious to the terror that awaited her. The idea that Susan may have known her killer only deepened the mystery and amplified the horror of her death. The crime scene was meticulously examined. Forensic teams found 2 sets of fingerprints and palm prints in the bathroom. A clue, a lead, a hope to catch the monster responsible for such a brutal act. But this was the late 80s, and the technology to analyze these prints was limited, leaving the investigators grasping at straws. As the news of Susan's murder spread, a pall of fear descended over Stephenville. A killer was on the loose, and the residents waited with bated breath, hoping for answers, praying for justice. Who could commit such a heinous act? The search for answers commenced. The case fell into the hands of Lieutenant Ken Maltby, a seasoned officer. A veteran in his field, Maltby was no stranger to the grim realities of crime, yet every case brought its own set of challenges, its own web of mysteries waiting to be untangled. The Susan Woods case was no exception. In the quiet solitude of Susan's bathroom, amidst the chilling silence, were whispers of the crime, 2 distinct sets of fingerprints and palm prints, a seemingly concrete lead, yet the technology of the late 80s proved to be a barrier rather than a bridge. Forensic analysis was in its infancy, its potential yet to be fully realized. The fingerprints and palm prints were like puzzle pieces, waiting for the right tools and the right mind to put them together. The initial stages of the investigation were a race against time, a battle of wits against an invisible enemy. Maltby, with his years of experience, threw himself into the case, tirelessly combing through every evidence, every lead, every possible connection. Yet the case refused to yield its secrets. The lack of forced entry suggested that Susan knew her attacker. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the case. The pool of suspects widened, encompassing everyone who knew Susan, everyone she trusted enough to let into her home. The task of sifting through this sea of potential suspects was daunting, but Maltby was relentless. Yet every lead seemed to fizzle out into a dead end. Every suspect interviewed, every alibi checked brought them no closer to the truth. The fingerprints, their most promising lead, remained an enigma, their owners elusive. Maltby's struggle with the case was a testament to its complexity. Each day was a battle, each night a quest for answers that remained just out of reach. His determination was unwavering, his resolve unbroken. Yet the case, like a stubborn lock, refused to yield its secrets. Despite his best efforts, the investigation reached a standstill. Enter Sergeant Donnie Hensley, determined to crack the case. Stepping into the shoes of Lieutenant Ken Maltby, Hensley brought a fresh perspective and renewed determination to the investigation of Susan Woods' murder. A seasoned officer, Hensley was not one to shy away from a challenge. In fact, he took on this complex case in his spare time, a testament to his dedication and commitment to seeking justice for Susan. Hensley was quick to question the established narrative. He started from scratch, re-examining the evidence and piecing together the puzzle of what had transpired that fateful day. His meticulous approach led him to a different conclusion than his predecessor. He theorized that Susan knew her killer. This perspective was based on the lack of forced entry at the crime scene, suggesting that Susan had willingly let her killer in. Moreover, evidence pointed towards the fact that Susan had entertained someone in her home. Was it a friend, a lover, or perhaps someone who wore a friendly guise only to harbor deadly intentions? Hensley's theory added another layer of complexity to the case. It meant that the killer could be anyone from Susan's circle, making the list of potential suspects longer and the task of finding the murderer even more daunting. Yet Hensley was undeterred. His determination to solve the case only grew stronger. He was ready to delve deeper, to interview Susan's friends and family, to uncover secrets and expose the killer hiding in plain sight. It was a race against time, a battle against the odds, and Hensley was prepared to face it head-on. But even with a new investigator and fresh perspective, the case remained as elusive as ever. Despite Hensley's efforts, the face of Susan's killer remained shrouded in mystery. The journey to justice was far from over, but with Hensley on the case, there was renewed hope that the truth would eventually surface. Several suspects entered the picture, but no one could be definitively linked to the crime. With the case now in the hands of Sergeant Donnie Hensley, the investigation took a new turn. Hensley, believing that the killer was someone Susan knew, started to delve into her personal life. Two names quickly floated to the surface: J.C. Borman and Roy Hayes. J.C. Borman, a bartender, had been involved with Susan. It wasn't just hearsay. Evidence of their involvement was physically present on Susan in the form of hickeys on her neck. But Borman was not so easily implicated. He willingly took a polygraph test and passed, his truth resonating through the rhythmic peaks and troughs of the lie detector. And the clincher, his fingerprints were nowhere to be found at the crime scene. Then there was Roy Hayes, the boyfriend of Susan's friend, Cindy. His involvement raised eyebrows, not just due to his proximity to Susan, but also because of his association with Dungeons & Dragons, a game controversially linked with Satanism at the time. But like Borman, Hayes too passed a polygraph test. However, he was told he failed. His fingerprints, like Borman's, were conspicuously missing from the scene of the crime. Hayes has always maintained his innocence, a constant refrain in a discordant symphony of questions and suspicion. Two suspects, a multitude of theories, but no concrete evidence. The fingerprints found at the scene, the silent witnesses to Susan's final moments, matched neither Borman nor Hayes. Polygraph tests, those ancient arbiters of truth and deception, could not point a damning finger at either man. The web of suspicion ensnared many, but the sticky thread of culpability eluded capture. The investigation, though relentless, was fraught with frustration. Each lead, each suspect seemed to promise the revelation of the killer's identity, only to slip away into the shadows of uncertainty. The truth, it seemed, was as elusive as the killer himself. Despite the many leads and suspects, the truth about Susan's killer remained shrouded in mystery. More than 3 decades have passed since Susan's murder, and the case remains unsolved. The mystery surrounding Susan Wood's tragic demise continues to cast a long shadow over the quiet town of Stephenville, Texas. Despite the tireless efforts of investigators, the identity of her killer remains elusive. The investigation, initially led by Lieutenant Ken Maltby and later picked up by Sergeant Donnie Hensley, unearthed two key suspects. J.C. Borman, a bartender with whom Susan was involved, and Roy Hayes, a Dungeons and Dragons player who was associated with Satanism. However, neither suspect's fingerprints matched those found at the crime scene, and both passed polygraph tests, leaving the case shrouded in uncertainty. The impact of Susan's case is deeply felt in Stephenville, where the community continues to seek closure and justice for Susan. Her story serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring quest for truth in the face of unspeakable tragedy. As the clock ticks on, the hope for a resolution persists. In the quiet town of Stephenville, Texas, the memory of Susan Woods lives on, and the search for her killer continues.